All right, and to shed more light, especially on what this bill will mean to the developers, Yala Member of Parliament Suleiman Shabal was this morning at the Spice FM. Let's listen in.
Towards this, and I'm very glad that the State Department of Housing has entered into a consultative discussion with everybody, with the end users, with the developers, with the banks. So we're all working together towards a common goal. And believe me, Eric, this housing thing will change lives in Kenya.
I can imagine that it would, Mheshimiwa. And I think that, unfortunately, we're looking at housing and affordable housing in a silo. And we can't do that. And
how are we looking at it in a silo?
Because if we're going to say that affordable means that in a month, you will then be able to spend this much to put aside towards housing while the rest of your needs do not suffer, then everything else that contributes towards those needs has to work in congruence. And we're saying that today, that there's a huge burden when it comes to the cost of living. We're saying that there's a huge burden in so many other things: access to market, roads, the cost of transport, the cost of fuel. If all of those things are not working together to make sure that there's more to go around, then it becomes increasingly difficult to say, I'm going to be able to set this much aside for housing. And so I'm saying that housing cannot work on its own without all of these other aspects coming into play as well.
CT,
yes,
as President Ruto would say, Kizungu mingi. I'm trying to understand exactly what you're saying.
Okay.
But let me guess.
Can I unpack it for you?
Yes. That's a good way. Unpack it for me. I honestly didn't understand what...
Let me. So here we are, and I'm saying, you have housing. And we're saying it's a fantastic plan.
Okay.
Great. It is. But there's 15 other things that an individual who's living in Nairobi, in this area where we're saying it's going to be affordable for them, that they have in terms of responsibility. If they have to spend so much on transport, there's clearly something within the transport sector that needs to be fixed. If they have to keep something aside because maybe there will be a problem with health and it is expensive for them to attend to, that also needs to be sorted out. If they have to make sure that education also has to be taken care of for their children and they have to keep something aside, that also needs to be sorted out. We can talk about affordable housing, but that also has to be looked at in the context of everything else that this individual has to do. And I'm saying that all of these things have to work together in order for it to be affordable. The rest of these things also have to be taken into consideration. And how can that happen is my question.
It's true. You are absolutely right. But, if you aspire for anything big as a nation, we need to make sacrifices. And I honestly don't believe that 1.5% is significantly going to impact your education, your food, your transport, and all that. I think we've politicized an economic issue, and we need to come to terms that if we want to be a Singapore, we need to pay some. We need to make some sacrifices. There's no shortcut to that. Come on, guys. We want to build a housing sector for the whole country. We want to be in a position where 10 years from today, every young person who gets a job aspires to own a house, and we don't want to make some sacrifices. Sometimes we have to be honest with ourselves. You want to buy a house, but you don't want to save. How?
One has to follow the other.
One has to follow the other, and frankly, I don't agree that that paying or putting aside 1.5% of your income is going to affect your transport or your housing, your education or all that. It's a sacrifice we have to make, unfortunately.
But for those things to work, I think this is where the argument comes in. As we are looking at lowering the cost of housing, just look at what the government, for example, has done. What is it that are the big ticket items when it comes to developing houses? Land is a big issue. Cost of inputs is a big issue. taxes are a big issue. So government comes in and says, all right, so let's waive the land cost by providing land. Let's waive some of these taxes by removing VAT. Let's look at how we can accommodate cheaper and better building materials and building technology. So we work on that. You see, that is trying to bring the cost per unit of a house.
Yes.
While at the same time, just like you've said, you've finished 584 apartments in phase 1 of Buxton Point. But the intended beneficiaries may not be able to actually take up these houses because of these other things. How much you're selling the houses for and how much their income is. There's a disparity. So the government has to look at these things holistically. As we're looking at housing on one end, are we looking at what other items are there in somebody's monthly budget? The cost of buying food, the cost of transportation, the cost of education for their children, the cost of healthcare. If those are not being ticked at the same time, then this housing one will become a burden instead of it becoming something that now makes it easier for somebody to live. I think that's a question here. Do you feel, because you're also a leader, a legislator, do you feel that these conversations are happening at the same time?
I don't think we can solve the problems of the world simultaneously. Okay. There have been serious efforts made at addressing, for example, the health problems that we have with the NHIF, which is a positive step in the right direction. And I can see it on the ground. Okay, I'm not talking at a high level. I'm seeing it on the ground, that families which have NHIF are better off. I'm seeing strides in education, okay, that we've made in a big way as a country. But this is not, it is not an either or. Human beings in general do not like to save. They like instant gratification. You and me, all of us. I mean, I've known all along that my daughters are going to university very soon. And I should have started an education plan for them long ago.
Yeah.
I'm worrying about it now.
When they're about to go to university.
When they're about to go to university. Okay. So all I'm saying is that we need to be a bit patient and to look at the bigger picture. Because this housing thing is not, don't just look on the people who are going to be buying the houses. Look at the multiplier effect. The number of people who have been employed in these housing projects, the number of contractors, the number of suppliers. This housing thing is going to re-energize our economy.
Why don't you actually give us that practically? Look at the project that you've just completed,
Yes.
phase 1, and you're going into phase 2, right?
Yes.
How much impact has it had in Kisauni and Buxton?
Okay, over the last 2 years, almost 3,000 people have been employed there. Okay, let's start there.
This is daily employment.
This is on and off.
Earning a daily wage?
Yes, earning a daily wage. Okay. We are going to have close to 100 people permanently employed in Buxton as security, as maintenance, as workers, as all that. Okay. In terms of companies that supplied the Buxton project, there were at least 55 different companies supplying different things. Now, a few minutes before I came in, you had people from TVET here.
Yeah.
Where are all those young people going to work? We're training them to be carpenters and masons and all that. You need projects like this to make the lives of those people who are studying meaningful. If you look at the land itself, look at Buxton. Buxton before had 540 residents. Today, phase 1, 584 already. So we've already surpassed the number of beneficiaries that Buxton had before. By the time we finish, it will be 4 times the number who were living there. Now look at the number of jobs being created there. So I'm a firm believer that this thing is... and by the way, I'm not saying this because I'm a developer. This is a project that I talked about in 2013 when I ran for governor the first time. It was in my contract with the people of Mombasa. We need to build affordable houses.
City.
You know, the conversation about affordable housing is incomplete. Mheshimiwa has talked about us, let's being honest. So I'm going to take it a notch further. Let's be blunt. There's urban renewal, as they say, what some people refer to as slum replacement. Okay? The government took upon itself in a time gone by the role of building such houses through the National Housing Corporation. And if you look at the houses, the places they were built in, they were low rent. They were meant to cater for this. World Bank, in their wisdom and the way they go about their business, they did away with this a long time ago. Now, the problem comes here. All these old estates are not city dwellings. They are urban homes and established ancestral homes for very many people. When I mean ancestral, is that even with Mheshimiwa, he'll tell you Buxton, you'll find fourth generation people living in Buxton. Now, the other problem is that with councils and then counties, the rents that they charged at best and as politely as possible could be called subsidized. They were nowhere near the market rates, nowhere. So people who lived there would expect to be paying the same rate, and yet realistically it is not possible. Simply because if a new building is put up at the costs and at the requirements that we currently have, it is not possible for someone to pay what they were paying. The only way they can is if the government, and this is government, it isn't the developer, can come up with a method of subsidizing this entire process, or bring in some interesting mixed development that caters for those who would pay these low rents, and it still can't be at the rate they were paying it, and those who are willing to pay a lot more. Now, this caters for that balance so that even the developer also ends up making a profit, because the developer is not developing. This is not for public good. This is for profit.
It's not philanthropy.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's not.
But city, the developer has been given land for free. Developer is not paying for the land.
Yes.
Developer is not paying VAT.
Yes.
Developer is not paying. Some of these costs have been waived.
Actually, there is a balance there. The developer also gives away some of those houses to the county. The county owned the houses previously owned by the council.
Yes.
So there are earnings that they expect. The developer agrees with the county. There's equity here.
Yes.
And the truth of the matter is that it ends up being more. If you look at the value proposition, even for the county, the moment you have those numbers increased, everything that the county benefited from the housing goes up.
So what I'm asking is, City, for example, and Shabal, you can even answer this.
Yes.
The original 530 residents of Buxton and how much they were paying as rent, are they going to be able to pay the same if they got into these new houses? And if not, why not?
The original residents of Buxton were paying between 2,800 to 3,500 shillings.
A month?
A month.
For what size of a house?
Tiny. Okay.
They were tiny two-bedroom houses, really.
Tiny two-bedroom house. And because they were paying such low rents, the county could not be bothered to maintain those places. They literally became slums. There were, sewage all over the place. There was no proper services, nothing. Okay. Now, there are two options here. Option number one is to do what we call social housing or the slum replacement. If we were to do social housing in Mombasa, then a lot of the people who are paying that sort of numbers can afford to go and continue paying that sort of number. But they wouldn't be satisfied with that. They would want proper, bigger houses, which is what Buxton is today. 30 square meters to 55 to 75 for 3 bedrooms. The issue here is everybody has to find their right economic sweet spot. What is affordable? There are people who live in Buruburu, there are people who live in Kilimani, and there are people who live in Muthaiga. So everybody will gravitate to where they can afford. And the social housing meets somewhere in between. It's not Muthaiga, neither is it at the lower end of the market, but it is somewhere towards the lower end of the market. Now, we as a country have to move into a situation or a place where at least 500,000 families can find a home for themselves. And it has worked in many parts of the world. It will not happen overnight. I'm repeating again, it will not happen overnight. But over the next 10 years, a lot of the problems that we're talking about, the affordability factor, if we can bring down that mortgage from 30,000 to 15,000 and below, there will be hundreds of thousands of families that will be lining up and will be able to afford this. Already in the Bomayangu platform, there are 330,000 applicants. 330,000 applicants. And remember that a lot of people have not applied because they feel they have no chance of getting.
They're all hopeful.
They're all hopeful. Yep. So the desire and the demand is there. And I'm repeating again, as Kenyans, we have to be patient. This thing is not going to happen overnight. The challenges that we are facing are real challenges that have to be addressed step by step. But we will get there.
Let's take a break. We'll continue shortly. 26 minutes to 9. Suleiman Shabal is the member of the East African Legislative Assembly. He's also the chairman of Gulf Cup Real Estate, the company that's developing houses in Buxton, in Mombasa, and also has affordable housing project in Ziwani, in Nairobi.
Starehe.
In Starehe constituency. Sio? Aya, mambo kama hayo. Continue shortly. Good morning.